I want to present something to you just in the last little bit of our time together, which might just help sort of expand your concept of what's normal. When the first human pair came to the planet, there was no one before them. So I'm talking now about the people you would know of from a Bible perspective as Adam and Eve, right? And actual names are Ammon and Aman. And they when they came to the earth, they incarnated onto the earth into a body that had been created for them, and they didn't have any consciousness of anyone else existing before them, and there was nobody else on the earth before them either. And so what was normal for them was vastly different to what is normal for us, as you can imagine. And what I'd like to do is just talk to you about how our version of normal came about. Do you mind if I mention that with you? So if you can think that there's this first human couple who were created. Their souls, of course, were created, but physical bodies were created, and their spirit bodies were created by God. They didn't have a parent in the sense that we have a parent, in the sense that there was no conception that took place to create them. There was no gestation period. They actually incarnated into adult bodies. So it's a very unique experience for them to incarnate into adult bodies. And they basically grew through the experience of coming into a connection with their adult body. By the way, you have the ability to communicate with these two spirits who still live in the spirit world at the moment, so you could find out the things that I'm going to tell you about now from them directly. But what happened was that when they decided, they made a decision, and the decision was basically this. The decision was, we want to be God. That was their decision. They wanted to be the same as God. They wanted to have complete self-determination. They didn't want to be God-reliant. They decided, it was a decision they made in their heart that they then acted upon, that they wanted to disconnect from God. They felt that that they would be able to have God's power if they decided to separate from God. And of course now they realise that choice or decision was quite fanciful and ludicrous actually, but at the time that was the decision that they had made. Now in that process, what happened was a number of things happened instantly to their soul. So their soul, what happened, so if you think of them as they still have a soul, there was half of a soul, the male half connected to the bodies. And then on the female side, there's the female half, the person who you know as Eve, connected to her bodies, spirit and material bodies. And together they made this choice to try to be like God, and to put in an effort to do so, and to disconnect from God. In the process, their soul degraded. And the instant that their soul degraded, there was an instant reflection in their environment. Now before then, they didn't have to grow anything to eat. Everything around them reflected their condition. So all the trees and the animals and the plants and everything reflected their condition. So they didn't have to grow food. They didn't have to toil to grow food. They didn't have to plant food. It all just automatically grew up around them, exactly what they wanted. They didn't have to do anything. And the animals also would come to them, like the animals would just come and sit on them, and basically what you would view as communicating with them. The animals would just come. So that was really enjoyable for them as well. As soon as they made this choice, none of the animals would come to them anymore. All of the animals were instantly afraid of them from that moment on. They also started to age for the first time, and they noticed it. There was quite a rapid deceleration in their condition, and they started to get lines on their face, what we call wrinkles. And all of those kind of things started happening quite rapidly, actually, after this degradation occurred in their soul. So there was an instant reflection of the change in their condition. They actually saw it immediately. Right? Now you think about how that would have affected them for a moment, and you start to feel like, whoa, we've made a much bigger decision than what we probably thought we'd made. Yeah. Now, already those three particular things, the thing where they had to now plant their food. They could not automatically hope to have food without them doing some physical labour or physical effort. They also could no longer expect animals to just come up to them anymore and engage with the animals anymore. The animals fled them, and the animals actually started attacking each other as well after this began. And by the time their children were born, the animals started doing this quite a lot, actually. So it was an instant reflection of their condition. But they had the advantage, I suppose you could call it, of an instant reflection of a change in their condition in a negative direction. So they could see what was going on all of a sudden in comparison to what was going on before. Does that make sense? And this is the problem we have, is that we've got nothing to compare our reality with. And so therefore, when animals don't come up and sit on us, wild animals and birds and everything, we view that as normal. Right? When we've got to go out and dig a hole and plant a tree before it will grow, and we've got to cultivate the soil in order to eat, we view that as normal. Right? When we see lines appearing on our face, we view that as normal. When we even see somebody die, even though it hits us pretty hard in our heart, we still tell ourselves that it's normal. Can you see that? The reason why we do that is because we've got nothing to compare normal with. So right at the beginning, if you could say this was the condition of mankind, which was a sixth sphere soul condition, very rapidly the condition of mankind reduced down to this condition, which is a first sphere condition, which is now. Right? The problem with living in this time frame or in this time frame or in this time frame or in this time frame is we've got nothing to compare it with, and therefore we view it as, we think that is normal. For the first human couple, when that happened and then that happened and they saw this degradation occur, they could see that there's a huge difference between that, and therefore they could see that it was not normal. Right? But for us, we just see life going on as it's always gone on. People die, people are born, people grow old, people have wrinkles, and so on, and we have diseases, and we view it all as normal. And none of it's normal. None of it is our normal way of life. But we accept it as normal because of a thing that people call conditioning. Right? Conditioning has a huge effect on your faith in God and in your ability to grow as a soul. Conditioning. Often we have conditioned ourselves that growth is not possible. We're basically telling ourselves a lot of the time that it's not possible to be any different than we currently are. When the reality is we're just having an unreal view of normal. You see, I would argue that this condition, even for mankind without God, this condition is normal. The condition that they began in, that's normal. And in that condition, I don't have to grow my own food. It all grows up around me. In that condition, all the animals will come to me. In fact, in that condition, I don't have all this emotional baggage to work my way through in that condition. Right? That's normal. What we're going through now is not normal. It's abnormal. It's way different than normal. And we have become so conditioned that this is normal that we have very little faith that normal is that condition. So we forget really easily that that's normal. So sometimes what happens when I talk with a group about the soul or about diseases or about anything else, we're so used to thinking that disease is normal. We're so used to thinking that it's normal to cry when somebody dies. We're so used to thinking that somebody dying is normal. We're so used to thinking a lot of different things that are nothing to do with normal. They are to do with our creation, mankind's creation, when we walked away from God, when we wanted to become gods ourselves. That caused us to then have a misconception of what is normal. And what I'd like you to just think about for a little bit is how your concept of what is normal causes you to not allow your imagination or your faith to grow. How you try to shut yourself down, and it doesn't allow you to think positively about what is possible. So unfortunately what happens when we're here and we think that's normal, we look at that, and you know what we call that? We call that a miracle. Right? We call normal a miracle. And there'll be many things that happen in the future on the planet, I feel, that we will call miracles, that'll actually just be normal in terms of what God normally created us to be. Yeah. And what we need to do is we need to start seeing that state as normal rather than still continuing to see this state as normal. You see, the world, what I call the world of people, want you to believe that this concept of normal is another term they use. Is real, or they call it reality, you see. And when you can see this viewpoint as normal, they go, you're crazy now. Right? But I put to you, who is crazy? Isn't it the people who have accepted this as normal when it's not normal? When it doesn't have to be normal. And so, unfortunately, terms like reality have a lot of emotional charge in them now, because people want us to believe that what they believe is normal is real, and therefore what we believe is crazy. And we need to start allowing ourselves to start having concepts, even inside of our own mind, let alone our own heart, that actually are no longer the accepted norm or accepted as normal. We need to allow ourselves to start perceiving what we believe would be a miracle can be something that happens every day. So for example, it even affects our day-to-day life in terms of our enjoyment of life. Many of us believe that it's not possible to be happy 24/7. I remember talking to a psychologist, and this was some time ago. I was sitting in a waiting room actually, and it happened to be a psychologist sitting next to me in this waiting room. And I said to him, he looked pretty sad, and I said to him, "Oh, you look fairly sad." And he says to me, he said, "Yeah, I probably am," he says. He said, "But you know what the problem is? It's not possible to be happy all the time." I said, "Okay, why do you say that?" He said, "It's just not possible. You look at everybody on the planet, nobody's happy all the time. So it's not possible to be happy all the time." So what was he doing? He was telling me that because he observed on the planet what he believed was normal, then the other thing, which was possible, he could not even accept as possible. So he's basically stopping himself from ever conceiving that complete happiness was even possible by examining what he believed was normal, which is really very abnormal. And when we had this discussion, this was 15 years ago now, we had this discussion, I felt quite overwhelmed with his sadness, because he was actually so sad, telling me about his disillusionment with happiness, that happiness was not even possible. And this is one of the other problems I see with all of this, is that a lot of times many of us even would think that it's a miracle that we would be happy all day, every day. We don't even think that's possible. Right? And we'd view that as utopia, a utopian dream, or a concept that a crazy person would have. Yeah. And the problem with any of these conditionings that we have been involved in our life is we end up with this idea of what God created is crazy and therefore not achievable, and what man created, which is here, that's what man created, we view that as reality and normal. And can you see, if we continue to hold on to that concept, our growth is going to be very severely affected, not only as an individual, but also as a human race. If we hold on to the concept that change is not possible, and that happiness is not possible, and that what is currently seemingly reality is not reality, if we hold on to the concept that it is reality, then we're going to end up in a very hopeless situation where we don't believe our own growth even is possible. Whereas if we start seeing that this is reality, as God created it to be, and this is unreality, then we have some ability then to actually confront what the society believes is normal. You think about your day-to-day life, what's one of the biggest fears that you have? Isn't it the fear that you'll be viewed as crazy or abnormal? Isn't that one of the biggest fears? Now, if you look at every person in history that's ever moved humanity forward, they have always been viewed as crazy by their peers. And that's always the case with almost every person historically. It starts off with them being viewed as crazy, or even before then, or usually after then, they're viewed angrily. In other words, they're attacked, and then they're accepted, and then they're often honoured. All in one lifetime, many of them go through this procedure, right? And what I'm suggesting is that if we hold on to this concept of normal, the world's concept of normal, and even our own concept of normal, which has been highly defined by the world's concept of normal, and if we hold on to that, we have no capacity to actually change to what God views as normal. But if we allow our minds, at least even our minds, to conceive that what we have on the planet today as normal, including the fact that animals are scared of us and they kill each other for food, including the fact that we have diseases, including the fact that we grow old and we die, including all of these facts that appear as reality, and if we see them no longer as reality, but rather just as the creation of a person who has walked away from God and truth, then we'll at least have some hope that things can change, and therefore have a desire to change. We'll at least do that. And that's what I'd encourage you to do, is to confront the world's viewpoint of normal in your day-to-day life.